So, hello guys, welcome back to a new video. Today, we're gonna be reacting to her story. Yeah, we reacted to his story in the last video, and today we're gonna be reacting to her story. We're gonna be seeing their shorts like we did in his story. Then in the next video, we might see their videos. But for now, we have her story. Okay, so this is just like basically guys who didn't watch my last video, which was this one. Let me show it. Yeah, this one 4 days ago. Yeah. So people who didn't watch that, go and watch that after this video. This girl has also been getting a lot of views, 1,679 views, and a lot of views actually. Maybe more than his story, but nobody else. We won't judge. But is there his story in this? Okay, there is. Okay, it's okay. Yeah, let's start it.
A woman stormed over while I was pushing my son David on the swing and told me, "Get away from that child. Where are his real parents?" I told her David was my son and took his hand to leave, but she stepped in front of me and blocked my path. "You're not going anywhere with him, you sick woman." I tried to walk around her, but she ripped David's hand out of mine, picked him up, and stepped back. He screamed and reached for me, but she pulled him against her chest and turned away. The whole park stopped and stared. She set David down on the grass behind her and crouched in front of him. "It's okay, sweetie. Tell me where your real mommy is. You're safe now." David sobbed and pointed at me. "That's my mommy. Mommy, please." The woman turned David's face toward her and shook her head. "No, honey. Look at her skin. Now look at your skin." She pointed at his arm. "It's different. She's not your mommy. She took you." David cried harder and tried to push past her, but she held him in place. I went to step around her, but she stood up and shoved me with both
Racist little. What the?
hands. I hit the grass hard. She turned to the rest of the park and screamed, "This woman kidnapped a black child. Somebody call the police." Other parents,
You racist as hell, bro. If you say that to a person, you racist as hell, bro.
pulled out their phones, and one of them was already on the line with 911. She picked David up against her hip and started carrying him toward her SUV. He kicked and reached for me, but she placed him in her car. I ran towards him, but she smiled at me and got in. Just as she was about to press the accelerator, the cops arrived. They asked what was going on, and she stepped out of her car and said, "She kidnapped a black child. Arrest her." I pulled David's adoption certificate out of my bag and handed it to the officer. He read it, looked at the woman, and told her to get my son out of her car right now. She stammered, "But look at them. Their skin is..." He told her she had 5 seconds before she was being arrested for attempted kidnapping of a minor. She went pale and immediately unbuckled David's seatbelt, and he sprinted to me. Then the officer cuffed her anyway. David looked at her with tears still on his face and said, "She's scary." Her face crumpled as she got in the squad car because the child she was protecting now saw her as a monster. A woman stormed over while I was...
That girl is racist as hell, bro. Bro, racism is not good, bro. You should not racist people.
The owner, Jerry, stormed in during a busy Friday night shift and immediately turned off the music. He told every customer they had to leave right now without paying. Everyone was shocked, but Jerry just ushered them out. Our whole staff started asking what was going on, but the second the last customer left, Jerry instantly padlocked the front door. None of my staff are leaving. Jerry pulled out his phone and started making phone calls immediately, calling corporate, his lawyers, the police. Our line cook, who never showed emotion and no one ever heard speak, asked if this was really necessary, but Jerry ignored him and ordered every staff member to gather in the back. When we did, I noticed my sister wasn't there. She was working with me tonight, but I couldn't see her. She told me earlier she was feeling sick, so I presumed she'd gone home. But then Jerry walked up to us with his hand out. "Everyone who has keys to the back freezers, hand them over right now." 5 of us gave him our keys, including me and the line cook. You see, our restaurant had 5 freezers in the back, and each key unlocked a different freezer. He marched the 5 of us to the back and stood in front of the first freezer. He started testing every single key. The first one didn't fit. The second didn't either. My heart was pounding, and when I looked beside me, the line cook was just standing completely still. Jerry kept muttering under his breath while trying the keys, but then he tried the key belonging to the line cook and the freezer opened. Jerry turned to the line cook immediately. "Stand against the wall. Hands in the air. Don't move." The line cook didn't say a word and backed up against the wall, his face unreadable. Jerry told us, "Hold his arms against the wall. Don't let him move." We were all confused, but did it anyway. But then Jerry pointed at me. "Not you. You need to see this." I was shaking as I let go of the line cook. Me and Jerry walked into the freezer, and he pointed at one specific container with tears in his eyes. My hands were trembling as I lifted the lid. My legs immediately gave out. My sister sister was inside. Her skin was blue, and her eyes were frozen open. I noticed a faint glow through her pocket, and when I reached in and pulled out her phone, one message was typed out to me, but never sent. Please help. The line cook locked me in the freezer. Please. I turned around and saw officers cuffing the line cook. I dropped to my knees and screamed at him. Why? But his face stayed completely still. I don't know. I just wanted to see what it would feel like. The owner, Jerry, stormed in.
I have no words. Guys. I have no words.
I tucked my toddler into her crib for nap time, but she refused to sleep and kept pointing at the birds outside the window. I want to fly like them. I told her she wasn't a bird, but then I heard a massive crash behind me. I turned and saw my husband was hauling a giant fan into the room. I got this 80% off on sale, babe. Look how powerful it is. He cranked it to full before I could respond, and the wind hit me so hard I stumbled backward. But then something shrieked, "Mommy!" behind me. My toddler had climbed onto the windowsill while I wasn't looking to reach for the birds, but now the wind from the fan had shoved her onto the ledge. I lunged towards her, screaming, "Turn the fan off!" But I wasn't fast enough. The fan's wind pushed my 2-year-old out of the second-story window. I watched her tip and bolted for the stairs, gripping my head in horror. My husband ran after me, screaming, "Babe, calm down. It's gonna be okay. Everything is fine." But I wasn't listening or going to calm down. I burst through the back door, hyperventilating and pale with fear. And then I saw my daughter, bouncing and giggling in a massive foam pit I'd never seen. My husband tapped my shoulder. I forgot to mention, the foam pits were on sale too. I told you everything was fine. I was still shaking when my daughter looked up at me with her arms stretched out wide. "Mommy, I flew like the birds." I tucked my toddler into her crib for nap.
That's funny.
I asked a karate master if he could train me for prison, and he kicked me to the ground. I twitched on the floor. I got 90 days for selling fake Jordans. I'm 95 pounds. If I don't learn how to fight, I'll die in there. He pulled me up with one hand. "We have much work to do, but there's no guarantee this will work." I grabbed his hand. "I'll do anything." He answered by taking my hand and bending my fingers back one by one until every knuckle popped. Lesson 1. Any man who puts his hand on you is handing you 5 small bones. Tears streamed down my face. "Yes, master." The next morning, he walked me into his kids' class and clapped twice. Attack her. 8 white belts swarmed me, and an 8-year-old girl swept my legs, dropping me flat on the floor. I limped over holding my ribs. "Why did you do that? They're children." He pressed a gold star onto her uniform. "If children can put you down, the yard will bury you." That night, I couldn't sleep because I knew he was right. A fight was guaranteed to happen, and when it did, I needed to survive. The next morning, I bowed my head. "I'm ready to do anything you ask." He pressed a gold star onto my chest. Good. A month of popped knuckles later, on my last free morning, he fed me a snake. As I chewed it while sitting cross-legged to meditate, he lowered something heavy onto my shoulders. My eyes shot open as I saw an anaconda thicker than my arm coiled around my neck, its tongue flicking at my jaw, but I kept my hands flat on my knees until it settled like a scarf. He nodded once. "You have achieved inner peace. You are ready." The next day, I went to prison, traded my clothes for a jumpsuit 2 sizes too big, and before the gate even shut, the biggest inmate in the yard stepped off the weight bench. She grabbed a fistful of my collar and lifted me onto my toes, smiling like a shark, showing every tooth. Fresh meat. Her knuckles pressed under my chin, and I grinned because she'd just given me her hand. I peeled her pinky off my collar and snapped it back, then the next, and the next, cracking each finger one by one as that shark smile dissolved into screams. She dropped to her knees, so I kicked her flat onto the concrete the exact way the karate master had kicked me. Everything he'd spent a month teaching me, I just used on the biggest inmate in the yard in 10 seconds. The yard went silent. I held out my hand the way the old man had held out his, and the shark took it with the hand that still worked.
Hey guys, I'm back.
I asked a karate master if he could train me for prison, and he kicked me to the ground.
That I don't have any words for that, but nice, not nice, I don't know. Nice, I don't know. Yeah.
Jake's mom pointed at the wall of 7 photographs, every one of them a different man named Peter, and announced, "Your son will be the 8th. I shook my head. No way. My uncle was named Peter too, and he went to prison for arson. People died. She waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. That has nothing to do with our Peters. 9 months later, my hands were still shaking from labor when I handed the nurse our paperwork, naming my son Oliver. Jake's parents came to the hospital that afternoon, and as soon as his mom saw the birth certificate, she turned red. "You'll regret that." She stormed out before I could ask what she meant. 4 weeks later, a CPS worker stood on our porch holding a report claiming Oliver was starving. She walked through our house, checked Oliver's weight chart, and found nothing, apologizing on her way out for wasting our morning. 2 weeks later, she knocked again, this time glancing at her notepad instead of me. Anonymous tip. Someone reported screaming. She looked past me at Oliver, asleep in his bassinet, and rubbed her forehead. Same phone number as last time. I still have to write this up. A month later, she came back a 3rd time, and before I could even open the door fully, she held up her hand. "This report claims you're planning to sacrifice him. This is getting ridiculous, and you need to file a police report." My hands went cold, and I pulled Oliver tighter against my chest. The next day, Jake and I sat across a metal table from a detective who spread pages of phone records in front of us, one at a time, tapping each page. Same number, every single call. Then he slid a printed text message across the table. Read this. It was from Jake's mom to his dad, sent the night Oliver was born. We need to get Peter before it's too late. We took them to court for harassment and filing false reports, and I stood up before the judge could speak. I turned to face Jake's mom directly, the printed message trembling in my hand. You wrote this the night he was born. We need to get Peter before it's too late. I set it down on the table between us. His name is Oliver. It's always been Oliver. Jake's mom's face crumpled, and she started crying while his dad stared at his own hands and said nothing. The judge cleared his throat. Ma'am, why are you so obsessed with naming your grandson Peter? She sniffled. Spider-Man's real name is Peter. The judge gave us a restraining order. Jake's mom pointed at the wall of 7 photographs.
Because Spider-Man's name is Peter, you don't have to name your son Peter. No, that's not even nice, bro. That's just mean.
I was working as a journalist in a war-torn country when a hand twice my size closed around my camera lens. The man towered over me. Women do not photograph men in this country. I held up my press badge while my fingers shook. I have a journalist visa. I'm just documenting. That's all. Across the square, 3 men with rifles stopped to watch us. He pried the camera out of my hands, held it at arm's length, dropped it, and brought his boot down. My heart dropped because I was isolated, and nobody in that market was going to help an American woman. He made a call without taking his eyes off me, and the men with rifles grinned ear to ear. 10 minutes later, an army truck pushed through the crowd, and 5 soldiers climbed out. All of them were staring straight at me. One stripped my bag and passport, while another zip-tied my wrists. Where are you taking me? For what? Taking pictures? They carried me into the car and started driving, and I knew they weren't going to answer any more questions. When we stopped, the big man leaned close for the first time since the market. He pulled me out and dragged me behind the store. But when we were alone, he whispered, I'm on your side, but you need to pretend to be mad at each other, because if the soldiers find out I want to protect you, they'll kill us both. I gulped hard, but before I could respond, he dragged me back to the car, and I screamed, You crushed my camera, you animal! When I got in, 5 soldiers laughed. The American should be killed. He smiled. I agree. The truck stopped at a ravine at dusk, and they dragged me out. The big man racked his rifle. I do this alone. The youngest one crossed his arms. I want to watch. My eyes widened, and I walked to the edge with the barrel in my back. Bang! I heard a shot, and the man immediately whispered, Drop to the floor now. I lay there lifeless, doing my best to be fake dead. The young man crossed his arms. Good. They walked to their car and drove away, and I had no idea how I was going to get back home. I was working as a journalist.
That's crazy, bro. That's crazy.
I woke up covered in itchy red spots, and I froze. It was chickenpox. I stroked my chin because I needed a way to cover them. Otherwise, Mom wouldn't let me go to Ava's playdate. I tiptoed into her bathroom and caked her foundation over every spot I could reach. It looked a little orange on me, but I figured it had to be good enough to convince her. But when Mom knocked an hour later, her palm hit my forehead the second the door opened. You're burning up, baby, and your color's wrong. I hugged my backpack. Nope, I'm fine, Mom. You're being dramatic. Let's get going. She grabbed her big work bag and carried me into the car instead. We're going to urgent care first. It's the one I work at, so I know they're nice people. I nervously kicked my feet against the chair in front of me because I had no idea what the doctor was going to say. When we got there, the intake nurse waved us in. Morning, Fiona. She pressed 2 fingers along my belly, hit a spot under my waistband, and I flinched. The color drained from his face. I think it might be appendicitis. We're going to run some tests, and if they come out positive, we're going to cut her open and perform surgery straight away. I completely froze, and the doctor drew a dotted line curve around my belly button where she was planning to cut me open. I jumped out of my seat. No, look! I pulled up my sleeve and wiped it against the pillow to get rid of the makeup. It's chickenpox. I covered it with your makeup for Ava's playdate. Please don't cut me open. Mom sat on the edge of my bed and smiled. Finally, took you long enough. I tilted my head in confusion, and she explained, Baby, you were orange in your doorway, in my foundation. There was never any surgery. I just wanted to teach you a lesson. I gasped because I thought I'd been tricking my mom all morning, when really, she'd been the one letting me. So, can I still go to Ava's? Mom turned her phone around to show me a photo of Ava in bed, covered in the same spots as me. Her mom called yesterday, sweetheart. There was never a playdate either. Don't lie to me again. She reached into the work bag and set the pink calamine medicine bottle for chickenpox on my blanket, packed before we ever left the house. I woke up covered in itchy red...
That's crazy. I have no words.
I had just unbuckled my daughter, Rosie, from her car seat when a woman marched up and pointed her finger at the handicap parking sign. People like you are why actual disabled people can never find parking. I pointed to the placard hanging from my mirror. I'm allowed to park here. My daughter has autism, and parking close gives me a few extra seconds if she bolts. The woman looked past me at Rosie, standing beside the open car door. She looks perfectly fine to me. I grabbed Rosie's hand just as a shopping cart rattled loose from the return and rolled across the lane. Rosie's head snapped toward it, and I squeezed her hand tighter while she twisted to get free. Eyes locked on the cart. The woman woman stepped closer, blocking the space between us and the store. Then park somewhere else. I pulled Rosie against my hip. Please. The woman lowered her voice. Don't use your kid to get out of this. Rosie yanked her hand out of mine and ran after the cart right as an SUV's reverse lights flashed. Rosie, stop, I screamed, but she kept running. I sprinted after her and caught the back of her shirt right before she crossed behind the bumper. The SUV jerked to a stop so close the brakes squealed. Rosie fought against my arms, still reaching for the cart, while I held her against my chest and tried to breathe. When I turned around, the woman was standing by my bumper with her hand over her mouth. I lifted Rosie against my hip and walked past her. She looks fine, I said, until she's not. I had just unbuckled my daughter. A mom yanked her daughter out of my Cinderella photo line in 105-degree heat and announced to the whole crowd that I was too sweaty and gross to be a real princess. I instantly clenched my fists because I'd been baking in a velvet ball gown all morning and I wanted to give her a piece of my mind. But when I looked at her daughter, she whispered, I didn't even get to show you the curtsy bow that I practiced. So while her mom called for the manager, I kept my hands folded and my smile on because I couldn't be the one who made her magical day even worse. A manager in a red polo jogged over, but the mom spun on him before he could open his mouth. Do you know what it took to get here? 3 years on a Make-A-Wish list? 3 years? She jabbed a finger at her. I hauled my brand new gorilla couch into my living room and walked upstairs to grab cushions for it. But when I came back down, my eyes widened in horror. The YouTuber Sambucha was suddenly on my gorilla couch, his arms resting above his head like he owned it. I dropped the cushions in shock and went to ask what he was doing here, but he sat up before I could. I'm your new neighbor, and by the way, you should really close your back door. He pointed at the cracked open back door, then patted my gorilla couch. Also, this is a fire couch. I'm gonna use it if that's cool. My doorbell rang before I could tell him no, and Sambucha's face instantly lit up. They're here. He shot up and ran past me to open my own door, and I gripped my head in disbelief. An entire crew instantly started flooding into my apartment, carrying a white table, a microphone, a PC, and a monitor. An entire recording setup. I screamed, what is going on? But Sambucha calmly replied, my new house isn't big enough for a recording studio, so I'm gonna use yours, while directing where to place all his equipment. My blood boiled in anger, and I tried to step in their way, but Sambucha slapped my hand away. The gorilla couch needs to be the centerpiece. He ordered his crew to move it, and when they did, they dropped it so hard I heard my floorboards crack under it. Then they shuffled out, while I stood there in disbelief because one of my favorite YouTubers had set up a recording studio in my living room without my consent. I told Sambucha to get out, but he completely ignored me and sat in his chair. Here's $600, buddy. Consider it rent. He slapped it on the table, but I immediately shoved it back and grabbed his mic. I said, get out. That's when Sambucha got up. He pushed me to the ground, and my head hit the edge of the gorilla couch as he stood over me and crossed his arms. I almost fought Jonah Hill. Don't think I won't fight you. He put on a bucket hat before I could react and sat back in the chair. He clicked record and began talking into the microphone. Hey guys, so today we're testing if we can turn our neighbor's house into a recording studio. That's when I snapped. I shot up and started ripping the cushions off the gorilla couch, my face red in anger. Sambucha laughed into the microphone. As you see guys, our neighbor is pretty angry, but he couldn't even finish his sentence before I yanked him out of his chair. I picked him up over my head and violently stuffed Sambucha into the gorilla couch. Sambucha was still screaming, no, as I slammed the cushions back on, trapping him inside. He tried to punch his way up, but I grinned and sat down exactly where he was trapped. You know, Sam, you're exactly the type of guy to get stuffed inside a gorilla couch. He kept punching and screaming, but I just put my arms above my head, then yanked out his monitor cable and watched the DVD logo bounce until it hit the top corner. We're gonna be here a while, Sam. I hauled my brand new gorilla couch into my living room and walked up. The safari jeep hit a ditch and launched me into the mud. I spat out dirt and immediately turned around to get back on, but the jeep was already driving away. The tour guide leaned out his window. Sorry, but we have to leave you. It's the rule. They sped off down the loop trail and my heart was beating out of my chest because I had no way to get back. And behind me, I heard something heavy moving in the water. I turned around, splashing the water behind me, and saw a crocodile with its jaws wide open. I kicked it in the eye and for a second, it thrashed backward. I was catching my breath, looking around for something I could use as a weapon to defend myself when I spotted more crocodiles emerging from the water. I scanned the swamp for anything to swing. I was about to give birth when I heard gunshots across the street. My husband Austin grabbed my hand. Don't worry, those are just fireworks, baby. I pointed at the shelf. Can you take my police badge and go check it out? He pressed a washcloth to my forehead. You're about to have our baby. I'm not leaving this room to go see some fireworks. I threw the blanket off. Fine, I'll do it myself. A contraction came that was so painful, it made me fold in half. I wrote it out and grabbed my badge. Austin spread his arms across the doorway. Please, get back in bed. I shoved past him. Duty comes first. I ran out the front door with one hand under my belly. Across the street, our 70-year-old neighbor was pinned against her front door, and a man in a ski mask had a pistol under her chin while he tore the rings off her fingers, robbing her blind. I raised my badge from the middle of her lawn. Hands in the air. I'm a cop. The pistol swung onto me, and now it was my hands in the air. The next contraction buckled my knees against her fence, and when I looked around for help, I saw Austin sitting on the grass crying, with his head helplessly buried in his hands. So I did the only thing I could think of, and lowered myself onto the grass, leaned back on my elbows, and started pushing the baby out. The man's hands shook in disgust, but I grinned because everything was going according according to plan. He backed away from my porch, one slow step at a time. Yo, what is that? What is that? The gun dropped from his hand and bounced in the grass, and I snatched it up and leveled it at his chest while the baby crowned. He cleared the fence without touching it and disappeared up the block, a grown man with a loaded gun, and he got disarmed by childbirth. Austin finally made it across the street and dropped beside me, crying harder than the newborn. It's a girl. I was about to give birth when I heard my older sister held a bread knife out towards me and said, "Make me a sandwich." I shook my head and told her I didn't know how to use a knife, and suddenly her eyes went wild as she raised it over her head. "You're making me that sandwich." She ran towards me with the knife, and get rewarded for being active. I was passing a water bottle to my son during our desert safari tour when an elephant extended its trunk towards him. He reached his hands up, and suddenly, the elephant wrapped its trunk around Caleb's waist. I screamed his name and grabbed for him, but my hand closed on hot air. He was already running away with my son, and I screamed, "We need to get him." Our guide Sifo was already on his feet. "Ma'am, please keep your feet on the floor. Driver, go." The truck lurched and threw me back into my seat. The whole herd was running with Caleb, and we passed a family of giraffes, and I thought they were going to attack us for disrupting their peace, but they just playfully tossed leaves from the tree onto us. When we got closer, I heard Caleb shrieking, but when I saw his face, he wasn't crying, he was laughing. The elephants were laughing too. The herd slowed down and got to a bend where a thin river still ran. The big elephant lowered Caleb onto its back, dipped its trunk into the water, and sprayed it over him, water going everywhere. He squealed and threw his arms up for more. It did it again. The elephant carried him back to the truck and set him down in my lap, soaking wet, grinning so wide I could see his teeth. Sipo lowered his binoculars. "He saw your son was overheating," he said softly. "He only wanted to give him a drink." Caleb pressed his wet face into my neck and pointed back at the herd. "Best safari ever." I was passing a water bottle to my son during My brother-in-law asked my husband, "Is the baby feeling better, Roger?" "We don't have a baby," I told him, and the words nearly killed me because I'm infertile. I looked at my husband for help, but he looked terrified. I didn't get why until his brother said, "But Roger called me last week about taking her to the emergency room." Roger instantly shot out of his chair. "I don't know what you're talking about. Babe, let's go." His brother looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You send me videos of her all the time." I sat there confused until he pulled out his phone and showed me a baby girl with Roger's green eyes. She was taking wobbly steps across a living room I didn't recognize. Then I heard a woman's voice saying, "Mom is so proud of you," and I almost threw up because I recognized that voice. "That's your coworker, Rebecca," I said, feeling dizzy. Roger shook his head frantically. "Babe, this isn't what it looks like." I didn't believe anything he said anymore, so I looked at his brother and asked, "How old is she?" 14 months, his brother said quietly. I felt like the rug had been pulled under me. I grabbed his phone and opened his bank account because I needed to know what else he'd been hiding from me. I felt vomit rise up my throat seeing months of daycare charges, formula, diapers, and baby clothes. Then Rebecca texted, "Don't forget the clinic needs the $15,000 by Friday for the next round." I felt tears in my eyes as I realized he'd paid a fertility clinic so Rebecca could have his baby, and he was going to do it again. "Roger, 14 months ago, we sat in a fertility clinic and you told me $15,000 for treatments was too much." He started crying. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Tears were running down my face at this point. His brother put his head in his hands. "Roger, what did you do?" Roger reached for my hand. "Please, I can fix this." I moved my hand far from his. "You're right. You are going to fix this," I said. I went to his transfer screen and Roger's eyes went wide. "Babe, what are you doing?" I sent $15,000 to my account before he could stop me. Then I called Rebecca on speaker. "Roger, did you send the $15,000? She asked. Roger whispered, "Please don't." But I continued anyway. "Rebecca, this is Roger's wife. Your $15,000 is paying for my fertility treatments now. You can have Roger, but just know he's too broke to pay for your next baby. Good luck." I hung up and dropped the phone in his lap. Roger reached for my hand, crying, "Please, we can figure this out." I pulled off my wedding ring and set it on the table. "I already did, Roger. I'm having my baby without you." My brother-in-law asked my husband, "I want to have pet animals as friends, like Michael Jackson," my son said, pressing his face to the chimp enclosure glass. His teacher had just told me he gets bullied and has no friends, so I turned to buy him a snack to cheer him up, but when I looked back, he was gone. Then a woman screamed, "Oh my God, there's a kid in the chimp enclosure!" My stomach dropped, and I looked over the railing to see my 6-year-old standing inside, walking straight toward the chimps. "You're going to get hurt! Come back here!" I screamed over the railing, but he kept walking toward a baby chimp sitting alone in the corner, and the big grown chimps crowded around him. "You're all by yourself like me! We can be friends!" he yelled, reaching out his hand towards the baby, but a huge adult chimp dropped down and bared its teeth at him. I went to jump in, but a keeper grabbed my arm. "It's better if you don't go. These chimps can rip a person apart in seconds." So I screamed, "Then you go save my son!" But he shook his head. "We can't. None of us are trained to go in. The handler will be here in 6 minutes." So I watched, frozen, as my son knelt and the baby crept into his lap. But the moment they touched, the grown chimps exploded, screeching and pounding the ground. Then the biggest one charged across the enclosure and reared up over my tiny son as I cried, and the keeper whispered, "He's not going to make it." But the baby chimp scrambled up my son's chest and wrapped its arms around his neck, and the biggest chimp stopped dead. It stared at them, then slowly lowered itself and backed away. Just then, the handler rushed in through the gate and carried my son out, safe, but the baby was clinging to his shirt.
Okay, so guys, that was the last video. The last shot. See you guys in the next video. Peace. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please subscribe, share, and like this. Meet you guys in the next video. God bless.